it's Aisha. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in the month of January. I'm going to be talking about the books that I read in order of favorites, least favorite to favorite. I read 4 books this month, which is pretty normal for me, but they were all sort of different reading experiences. I have some nonfiction here, some books that I've been meaning to get to for a long time, and just some new books that I picked up just on a whim, so I'm excited to talk to you about them. First, we have The Easter Parade by Richard Yates. He wrote Revolutionary Road, which has been one of my favorite books for a while now, and this is his second most popular book. It says, even as little girls, Emily and Sarah are very different from each other. Emily looks up to her older, sensible sister and is jealous of her relationship with their absent father. And, later, her seemingly golden marriage. The path she chooses for herself is less safe and conventional, and her love affairs never really satisfy her. Although the bond between them endures, gradually the distance between the two women grows, until a tragic event throws their relationship into focus one last time. So what I didn't like about this is that it's not a very happy book. It's very short, but just in these few pages, there's what feels like a disproportionate amount of ennui, boredom, I hate that word, boredom, or just a sort of slow monotony of life that I could unfortunately relate to, but didn't always make for the best reading experience. And I found that the characters just didn't really jump out to me the same way that they did for Revolutionary Road. So that was The Easter Parade, my least favorite read of the month. Next, we have a disappointing read. I really wanted to like this book, and I'm hesitant to say that I didn't like it because so many people do, but this is just my take, just my opinion, and I'm still going to talk about it. It's The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. This was put out in the UK by Fleet. I got this edition from Book Depository because I liked the cover. It's adorable, but it came out in 2019. And The Nickel Boys is a Pulitzer Prize winner for fiction and a National Book Award winner. Elwood Curtis knows he's as good as anyone. Growing up in 1960s Florida, he has taken the words of Dr. Martin Luther King to heart. He is about to enroll in the local black college, determined to make something of himself. But given the time and place, one innocent mistake is all it takes to destroy his future, and so instead of college, Elwood arrives at the Nickel Academy, a segregated reform school claiming to provide an education which will equip its inmates to become honorable and honest men. The Nickel Boys picks up with this level-headed young boy being raised by his grandmother, just trying to make the best for himself in what's kind of a tough situation, being like a young black child in America in the 1960s. And he has a bright future ahead of him, and his bike breaks down one night, and he gets a ride from a stranger, and they're pulled over later and discover that the car is stolen. And this offense somehow lands him, instead of in jail, in what's supposed to be a better, safer option, which is this Nickel Academy, which is supposed to serve as a reform school, but it actually ends up being a torture center for these young kids, black and white. And I believe that Colson Whitehead did a lot of research for this book, and that it's even based on, the Nickel Academy is based off of a real place. And I think that level of interrogation into American institutions and the history of them is really fascinating, but unfortunately this book is also just one of those slogs to get through. I couldn't quite connect with the characters, which is, I think, a big part of what's supposed to be enjoyable about this story. There are a lot of scenes of the boys in this school, sort of bonding and talking with each other, and I felt that those scenes weren't really hitting me emotionally where I wanted them to, and I found that even with the twists and the short length of the story, it didn't really keep my attention in the same way. So that was The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. Next, we have The Bass Rock by Evie Wyld. This book was put out by Pantheon last year. The lives of three women weave together across centuries in this dazzling new novel. Sarah, accused of being a witch, is fleeing for her life. Ruth, in the aftermath of World War II, is navigating a new marriage in the strange waters of the local community. 6 decades later, Viv, still mourning the death of her father, is cataloging Ruth's belongings in Ruth's now empty house. As each woman's story unfolds, it becomes increasingly clear that their choices are circumscribed, in ways big and small, by men who seek to control them. But in sisterhood, there also is the possibility of survival and a new way of life. Intricately crafted and compulsively readable, The Bass Rock burns bright with love and fury, a devastating indictment of violence against women, and an empowering portrait of the resilience through the ages. I love this book. It is so dark, but I feel like the atmosphere is built really well. Each character that I mentioned before sort of gets their own chapters and own perspectives that we get to hear from them. And it is interesting that with the changing levels of autonomy for women in their era, I think the earliest section is in the 18th century, the narrative is very removed and you sort of feel like you're in a fable or in a fairy tale where the characters don't really have a whole lot of life or autonomy or say. My favorite passages were in the 1960s timeline, and that was, I believe, narrated in third person, so we sort of get insight into Ruth's thoughts as a housewife, sort of trying to adjust to life in this new home for herself with these stepchildren that she's helping raise and her new husband. But the contemporary passages move into first person, so we get to see Viv and her immediate emotional experience is very much on the page. So that's The Bass Rock by Evie Wyld. Finally, we have my favorite book of the month. I've been recommending this to everybody. I can't get enough of it. I find myself reaching for it and reading passages to whoever will listen. And it is the #1 New York Times bestseller, The Body Keeps the Score. Brain, Mind, and the Body in the Healing of Trauma by Bessel van der Kolk, MD. This book is fantastic. It is a sort of survey of psychotherapy advances and our understanding of trauma through most of the 20th century. The author is a psychotherapist who has been working for years in the field, and he describes a number of really interesting case studies working with veterans, working with victims of childhood abuse and survivors of childhood trauma. And the blurb says, "Trauma is a fact of life. Veterans and their families deal with the painful aftermath of combat. 1 in 5 Americans has been molested. 1 in 4 grew up with alcoholics. 1 in 3 couples have engaged in physical violence. Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, one of the world's foremost experts on trauma, has spent over 3 decades working with survivors. In The Body Keeps the Score, he uses recent scientific advances to show how trauma literally reshapes both body and brain, compromising sufferers' capacities for pleasure, engagement, self-control, and trust, among other things. He explores innovative treatments from neurofeedback and meditation to sports, drama, and yoga that offer new paths to recovery by activating the brain's natural neuroplasticity. Based on Dr. van der Kolk's own research and that of other leading specialists, The Body Keeps the Score exposes the tremendous power of our relationships, both to hurt and to heal, and offers new hope for reclaiming lives. This book is so good. It was actually my first read of the year, and what I like about it is that it has actually helped me reshape the rest of my reading and give sort of psychoanalysis to the other books that I read this month. And I think so much of our fiction and so much of our storytelling is centered in trauma. There's so much interest in trauma and these major life events that have so much impact on the characters that we love to read about. And yet there isn't, often in fiction, and it's not fiction's job, it doesn't quite explain how trauma impacts behaviors for characters and obviously real people later on. And I think that this gives a voice to some of that. My favorite passages from this book focuses on the adverse childhood experiences study. In the 1990s, scientists were interested in how early childhood experiences, negative childhood experiences, could impact one's outcomes throughout the rest of their life, not just their own behaviors and the sort of patterns that are set up through abuse, through trauma that people react to, but also how it literally changes people's thinking when it comes to interacting with new situations. I think what I like about this book is that it doesn't sort of section people and their experiences off into different categories, really. It sort of recognizes that so many people are affected by trauma that they either do or don't recognize, and that in many ways childhood abuse and childhood trauma is an epidemic. It is something that's affecting all of us, because if you haven't been abused, or you haven't had adverse childhood experiences, or whatever else, you know somebody who has, and you're being impacted by somebody who has had their entire worlds shift because of the abuse that they experience. And it's really outward looking, it's really forward looking, it really directs readers to different methods of treatment, and I love it for that. I think it is such a good resource, and I'm excited to pass it on. So that's it. Those are the books that I read for the month of January. Thanks for sticking with me through this. I don't know if I'll do a February TBR. I don't really work well off of TBRs, but I am excited to keep reading in the coming months. And let me know if you've read any of these. Let me know if you plan on reading some of them, or if not, what you are planning on reading for the next month. I would love to know. Until then, I'll talk to you later. Thanks for watching.